Breaking the Silence, Transforming Intergenerational Communication in Black Communities. Females need to shut up. 5 words. 5 devastating words that slice through the soul of anyone who hears them. 5 words that encapsulate centuries of silencing, generations of suppressed voices, and communication patterns that continue to fracture our communities. I recently had the profound privilege of interviewing Shay Russell, a visionary truth teller whose courage in confronting harmful communication patterns has sparked a movement of authentic dialogue across the generations. Shay's brilliance lies not just in identifying these destructive patterns, but in her revolutionary approach to healing them. By recording a difficult family conversation where she was told those 5 words, females need to shut up, she created irrefutable evidence of patterns that many deny exist. This seemingly simple act of documentation represents an act of resistance that ripples through families, communities, and generations. Shay's work reminds us that transformation begins with truth. Her willingness to stand in uncomfortable spaces and name what others dare not speak has created pathways for thousands to begin their own healing journeys. She embodies what courage looks like when wrapped in compassion. What happens when we're told our voices don't matter? What occurs in our communities when half our population is systematically silenced? And most importantly, how do we break these cycles that have persisted for generations? The answers matter more than we might realize. They matter because our mental health depends on it. They matter because our children's futures depend on it. They matter because the very strength and survival of our communities depends on it. When Shay shared her experience with me, 3 critical insights emerge that I believe can transform how we communicate across generations in Black communities. First, generational communication patterns can perpetuate harmful dynamics that create invisible walls between us. The interaction Shay described highlights how older generations sometimes struggle with accepting feedback or different perspectives, especially from younger individuals or women. These aren't just uncomfortable moments, they're manifestations of power structures that create barriers to healthy communication and emotional growth within our families and communities. Consider for a moment the weight of being told to shut up simply because of your gender. Consider how that message, repeated over years and decades, shapes one's sense of worth, one's willingness to speak truth, one's very understanding of their place in the world. These aren't minor inconveniences, they're wounds that shape souls. Second, breaking these cycles requires conscious effort and new tools. Many Black adults are now rethinking inherited communication practices as conversations around mental health, trauma, and emotional intelligence expand in our communities. Recording difficult conversations, as Shay did, can be one powerful tool for creating awareness where denial once reigned. When we can no longer say that never happened or you're being too sensitive, we create space for honest reflection and genuine change. Third, emotional intelligence and validation are crucial for healthy relationships. The dismissal Shay experienced reflects outdated views on gender roles that damage mental emotional well being. Modern approaches emphasize emotional validation and open communication rather than suppression. When we validate each other's experiences, even when they differ from our own, we create foundations for healing. These insights aren't just theoretical, they're being put into practice across the country in ways that are transforming Black communities. In Cleveland, animator Jason Hawkins and rapper Archie Green have developed programs using art and music to address communication barriers and emotional expression in Black communities. Both artists struggled with depression and family loss, finding that traditional communication methods in their families didn't provide space for processing grief and trauma. Jason shares, after my brother died, no one in my family knew how to talk about it. We just didn't. I started drawing these animations about him, about loss, about things I couldn't say out loud. And something miraculous happened. My father saw one and started crying. Then he started talking. Animation became our bridge when words alone failed us. Archie's story parallels this journey. After battling depression silently for years, he created Popsicles and Pills, a hip hop track about mental health struggles in the Black community. The first time I performed it, he recalls, an older man came up to me afterward, tears streaming down his face, saying, "You just told my story, son. I've been carrying this for 40 years and never had words for it." They advocate for creative expression as a tool against generational trauma, using their respective art forms to model healthy emotional communication. Their work has helped community members, particularly across the generations, find new ways to express difficult emotions and experiences. Growing up in environments where emotions were often suppressed, both artists experienced personal mental health challenges before discovering how creative outlets could transform their emotional well being. They've developed community workshops where different generations come together to share experiences through art, breaking down communication barriers that have existed for decades. Their initiative has created safe spaces for Black community members to practice new communication patterns that honor emotions rather than dismissing them. As Archie often says, sometimes the beats and rhymes can express what our mouths have been trained to keep silent. This creative approach directly addresses the type of communication barriers Shay experienced, showing practical ways to bridge generational gaps in emotional expression. But the transformation doesn't stop with art. A recent psychiatric model specifically developed for young Black adults focuses on cultural pride and psychological safety in communication. Many young Black adults struggle with expressing themselves authentically when older generations dismiss their perspectives or impose outdated expectations. The model emphasizes embracing and having pride in your culture unapologetically and feeling safe to connect with your culture, including the right to express oneself fully. When implemented, this approach has helped young Black adults develop stronger self advocacy skills while maintaining cultural connections. The model emerged from research showing how intergenerational communication patterns often silence younger voices, particularly around emotional needs. The framework has been adopted by several community organizations to facilitate healthier cross generational dialogues, creating new standards for respectful communication that honor both cultural traditions and individual emotional needs. As Maya Angelou wisely noted, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. For too many in our communities, that agony has been a silent companion for generations. Perhaps most promising is the work of Dr. Deidre Lodrick, a Black mother and Houston child educator who leads a movement toward gentle parenting that's transforming intergenerational communication. Many Black families have inherited communication styles where elders' perspectives cannot be questioned and emotional expression is discouraged, particularly for women and children. Dr. Lodrick promotes approaches focused on patience, emotional validation, and open communication rather than authoritarian dynamics. Families adopting these methods report reduced conflict and improved mental health outcomes across generations. Growing up, Dr. Lodrick shares, I was told to toughen up and keep my emotions in check, but I saw how those feelings were suppressed and how I struggled as an adult. I didn't want that for my children. The initiative has helped thousands of Black families develop new communication patterns that respect all voices, regardless of age or gender. This shift is breaking generational cycles of emotional suppression that have contributed to mental health challenges in Black communities. If more people in our community embraced emotionally intelligent communication across generations and genders, we would likely see reduced transmission of traumatic stressors between generations as people would feel safer expressing and processing difficult emotions. We would see improved mental health outcomes, particularly for Black women and younger generations who have historically been told to suppress their perspectives. We would build stronger family bonds built on mutual respect rather than rigid hierarchies that silence certain voices. And we would develop more effective problem solving as all perspectives would be valued regardless of age or gender. As Audre Lorde powerfully stated, your silence will not protect you. And indeed, the silence we've been conditioned to maintain has not protected our communities from intergenerational trauma, mental health challenges, or fractured relationships. I want you to remember that recording difficult conversations, as Shay did, isn't about catching someone or proving them wrong. It's about creating awareness of communication patterns that may be unconscious but harmful. This awareness is the first step toward healing generational trauma around communication and developing healthier ways to connect across differences of age, gender, and perspective. Today, I challenge you to become a disruptor of silence. I challenge you to examine the patterns in your own family where voices, perhaps your own, perhaps others, have been systematically silenced. What would happen if you created space for those voices to emerge? What healing might become possible? This isn't just about having more pleasant family gatherings. This is about dismantling structures of oppression that begin in our own homes and ripple outward into our communities and institutions. This is about recognizing that when we silence voices within our families, we rehearse patterns that silence us in the broader world. The revolution begins at the kitchen table. It begins when we say, your voice matters here. It begins when we have the courage to speak and the wisdom to listen. I challenge you to have one conversation this week where you intentionally make space for a voice that has traditionally been silenced in your family or community. Record it if necessary. Reflect on it afterward. Notice the discomfort and sit with it rather than running from it, because transformation lives in that discomfort. Healing emerges from that vulnerability. And the future of our communities depends on our willingness to break these cycles now. Your voice matters. Their voices matter. And together we can create a symphony of healing that resonates across the generations yet unborn.